December 19, 2003. 2:15 p.m., Baltimore-Washington International Airport. Sarah Johnson steps out of an Uber at Terminal B. She's 23 years old. Johns Hopkins medical student, top of her class. She's heading home to Richmond, Virginia for Christmas. Her family is waiting. Her little sister has her bedroom ready. The tree is up. Presents wrapped. Sarah pulls a small rolling suitcase behind her and adjusts the backpack on her shoulder. She's packed light. 5 days at home. She'll be back in Baltimore by Christmas Eve to study for spring semester. She walks through the automatic doors into Terminal B. The airport is packed. Holiday travel chaos. Families with children. Business travelers. College students heading home. Sarah has done this trip a dozen times. Baltimore to Richmond. 50-minute flight. Easy. She approaches the check-in counter at 2:20 p.m. The ticket agent processes her reservation. Sarah checks her suitcase and keeps her backpack as carry-on. Boarding pass in hand. Gate C14, Flight 1847 to Richmond. Departure 4:30 p.m. Sarah walks towards security. The line is long. She pulls out her phone and sends a text to her mother at 2:47 p.m. at the airport. Boarding at 4. See you around 6. Love you. Her mother replies immediately. Can't wait, sweetie. Drive safe from the airport. Love you so much. Sarah smiles and pockets her phone. Around her, travelers shuffle bags and remove shoes. TSA agents call instructions. It's controlled chaos, but Sarah is patient. At 2:51 p.m., Sarah Johnson passes through the TSA security checkpoint. This is confirmed. Airport records show it. Her boarding pass is scanned. She places her backpack on the conveyor belt. Steps through the metal detector. No alarms. She collects her belongings and walks into the secure area of Terminal B. She is now past the point where only ticketed passengers are allowed, surrounded by gates, restaurants, shops, and hundreds of other holiday travelers. Gate C14 is an 8-minute walk from security. Sarah has over an hour before boarding. Time to grab food, maybe find a quiet spot to read. She moves into the terminal, and then she vanishes. No screams, no struggle, no witnesses stepping forward. Just gone. Somewhere between that security checkpoint and Gate C14, Sarah Johnson disappears. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from right now. At 4 p.m., boarding begins for Flight 1847 to Richmond. Gate agents scan boarding passes as passengers file onto the plane. Sarah's name is on the manifest. Seat 17A, but she never appears. At 4:30 p.m., the flight pushes back from the gate. One empty seat. The gate agent notes it in the system. It happens. Passengers miss flights. It's not unusual enough to raise alarms. The plane takes off without Sarah Johnson. At 5:45 p.m., Flight 1847 lands at Richmond International Airport. Linda and Robert Johnson are waiting. They'd driven together, excited to see their daughter. Christmas music playing in the car. Talking about dinner plans. What movie they'd watch as a family. Passengers stream out. Families reuniting. Hugs and laughter. The Johnsons scan faces. Waiting for Sarah. The crowd thins. Still no Sarah. Linda checks her phone. No messages. She tries calling Sarah. Straight to voicemail. She tries again. Voicemail. By 6:15 p.m., the gate area is nearly empty. Linda's stomach knots. Robert approaches an airline employee. Excuse me, we're waiting for our daughter. She was supposed to be on this flight from Baltimore. Sarah Johnson. The employee checks the computer. She was booked on this flight, but she didn't board in Baltimore. Linda's heart drops. What do you mean? She texted me she was at the airport. The employee looks sympathetic but confused. Our system shows she checked in and checked a bag, but she never boarded. Her luggage was removed before departure per protocol. Robert's face hardens. Where is her luggage now? It should be at our baggage services office in Baltimore, sir. This doesn't make sense. Sarah had confirmed everything. She'd texted. She was at the airport. She'd checked a bag, and then didn't get on the plane? Robert calls Sarah, straight to voicemail. He texts her. "Sarah, where are you? We're at the airport. Call us immediately." No response. Linda calls Jessica Coleman, Sarah's best friend and roommate. Jessica answers on the second ring. "Jessica, it's Linda Johnson. Have you heard from Sarah today?" "Yeah, I saw her this morning. She seemed fine. Excited to go home." "Why?" Linda's voice cracks. She didn't get on her flight. The plane landed without her. She's not answering her phone. Jessica's tone shifts. That doesn't make sense. Sarah wouldn't miss a flight without calling. "Let me try her too. I'll call you right back." Jessica gets the same result. Voicemail. By 7 p.m., the Johnsons are in full panic. Robert calls the airline's customer service line. After being transferred multiple times, a supervisor confirms what they already know. Sarah checked in, checked luggage, passed through security, but never boarded. "Sir, is it possible she changed her plans?" "No, absolutely not. She was coming home for Christmas. She confirmed everything this afternoon. I'd recommend contacting Baltimore Airport Police. They can check security footage." Robert immediately dials Baltimore County Police. It's 7:30 p.m. now. Over 4 hours since Sarah walked through security. The officer takes down information. Name? Sarah Elizabeth age? 23. Last known location? Baltimore-Washington International Airport. She went through security at 2:51 p.m. She was supposed to board a 4:30 flight to Richmond. She never boarded. Has she ever done anything like this before? No. Never. She's a medical student at Johns Hopkins. Responsible. Reliable. And something is wrong. The officer's tone is professional but not urgent. We'll send someone to check her residence. We'll notify airport police. But sir, there's usually a reasonable explanation. Give it a few more hours. Robert wants to scream, but he keeps his composure. Please, just find her. By 8:30 p.m., a Baltimore County police officer arrives at Sarah's apartment in Fells Point. Jessica and Sarah's other roommate let him in. The officer walks through the space. Sarah's bedroom is exactly as she left it. Bed neatly made, laptop closed on her desk, textbooks stacked in order. Everything appears normal. The only items missing are the suitcase and backpack she took to the airport. The officer takes photos and asks questions. When did you last see her? How did she seem? Any problems? Anything unusual? Jessica answers firmly. Sarah was fine. She'd just finished finals. She aced them. She was excited about Christmas. There was nothing wrong. Nothing that would make her disappear. The officer makes notes, but Jessica can tell he's not treating this as urgent. Not yet. Airport police at BWI begin pulling security footage. They locate Sarah easily. Entering the terminal at 2:17 p.m., approaching the ticket counter. Walking toward security. At 2:51 p.m., she passes through the checkpoint. And then the trail goes cold. No footage of Sarah at gate C14. No footage at any restaurants or shops. No footage of her returning to the main terminal. The cameras don't cover every angle. There are gaps, blind spots, service corridors with no surveillance. Sarah Johnson entered the secure area of one of the busiest airports on the East Coast during one of the busiest travel days of the year. Surrounded by hundreds of people. Monitored by security and cameras, and she vanished. By midnight, Sarah has been missing for 9 hours. Linda and Robert drive back to Richmond in silence. They can't listen to Christmas music now. The drive is dark and filled with terrible thoughts. Emily Johnson, Sarah's 19-year-old sister, sits in Sarah's childhood bedroom staring at her phone, willing it to ring, willing Sarah's name to appear with some explanation, but the phone stays silent. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from right now. Sarah Johnson wasn't the type of person who disappeared. Sarah wasn't impulsive. She wasn't reckless. She was organized, disciplined. The kind of person who planned her week down to the hour and color-coded her study notes. Sarah was 5'6" with shoulder-length brown hair usually pulled back in a ponytail. She had her mother's warm smile and her father's quiet determination. At 23, Sarah was exactly where she wanted to be. She'd earned her spot at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine through relentless work. High school valedictorian in Richmond. Full academic scholarship to University of Virginia for undergrad. Double major in biology and chemistry. Perfect GPA, MCAT scores in the 99th percentile. But Sarah wasn't just about grades. Her professors described her as genuinely passionate about medicine. She'd chosen pediatric oncology. She wanted to treat children with cancer. The decision came from watching a childhood friend battle leukemia and survive. That experience changed Sarah's life. She wanted to be the doctor who gave families hope. Her friends loved her. Jessica Coleman, her best friend since their first year at Hopkins, described Sarah as the most reliable person she'd ever known. If Sarah said she'd meet you somewhere, she was there early. If she said she'd call, she called. She didn't disappear without explanation. That wasn't who she was. Sarah came from a family that valued communication. Her father, Robert Johnson, had been a Navy officer for 20 years. Discipline and structure were built into their household. Her mother, Linda, was a high school English teacher in Richmond, beloved by students, the kind of teacher who genuinely cared. And then there was Emily, Sarah's younger sister, 4 years apart. Emily idolized Sarah. They talked at least 3 times a week. I shared everything. Sarah had been the one Emily called when she got her college acceptance letter. The Johnson family was intentional about staying connected. Sunday phone calls were sacred. Holidays were non-negotiable, Christmas especially. It was the one time everyone came home no matter what. Nothing took priority over Christmas in Richmond. Sarah had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Her first semester of medical school had been brutal. 18-hour days, constant exams, relentless pressure. But she'd survived, thrived even. She'd just completed her final exams. She was exhausted, but proud. She'd been counting down until she could collapse on her childhood bed and wake up to her mother's cooking and her sister's laughter. The week before she disappeared, Sarah's life was completely normal. She attended lectures, studied at the library with Jessica. On December 16th, she called her mother to confirm flight details, talked about what she wanted to eat when she got home. Her mom's lasagna, her dad's chocolate chip cookies. On December 17th, she talked to Emily about their Christmas morning tradition. Stockings first, then presents, then breakfast. Emily was excited. She'd bought Sarah a gift she knew her sister would love. On December 18th, Sarah texted her father a joke about the Army-Navy football game. They had a running joke about military rivalries. Robert texted back with a laughing emoji and "See you soon, kiddo." Everything was normal. Everything was fine. December 19th started like any other day. Sarah woke up in her Baltimore apartment. She showered, got dressed, dark jeans, her Johns Hopkins sweatshirt, comfortable travel clothes. She finished packing her small suitcase and backpack. Jessica saw her that morning around 11 a.m. in the kitchen. Sarah was making toast. "Excited to go home?" Jessica asked. Sarah smiled, so excited. "I'm going to sleep for 3 days straight. You deserve it. You killed those finals. We both did." "What are you doing for Christmas?" "Flying to Chicago tomorrow. My flight's in the afternoon. Text me when you land. I'll see you back here on the 24th. Safe travels, Sarah. You too." That was the last time Jessica saw her. Sarah spent the afternoon finishing packing and tidying her room. She called her Uber at 1:45 p.m. She double-checked her flight details. Departure 4:30 p.m. She wanted to arrive early. The Uber arrived at 1:50 p.m. Sarah locked the apartment, slung her backpack over her shoulder, grabbed her suitcase and headed out. The ride to BWI took 25 minutes. Police would later track down and interview the driver. He remembered nothing unusual, just a young woman, quiet, polite. Sarah walked into Terminal B at 2:17 p.m. Security cameras captured her clearly. She looked like thousands of other travelers that day, just another person trying to get home for the holidays. She had no idea she would never leave that building alive. When someone vanishes from a major airport, it doesn't stay a local police matter for long. Within 48 hours of Sarah's disappearance, this had become a multi-agency operation. Baltimore County Police took the lead since Sarah was a Baltimore resident. The FBI opened a file because of potential interstate implications. The Transportation Security Administration launched an internal review. The BYU Airport Authority assigned investigators. Maryland State Police provided resources. This wasn't a small-town missing person case. This was a Johns Hopkins medical student disappearing from one of the busiest airports on the East Coast during Christmas travel season. The pressure was immediate and intense. Detective Karen Brennan from Baltimore County Police became the lead investigator. Brennan was a 15-year veteran with a reputation for thoroughness and an almost obsessive refusal to give up on cases. When she reviewed Sarah's file on December 21, 2003, she knew immediately this was different. Brennan sat in her office reading through the initial reports. Sarah's background, her phone records, the security footage, everything pointed to one conclusion. This woman didn't just walk away, Brennan told her captain. Everything about her life says she wouldn't disappear voluntarily. She had finals. She passed. She texted her mother minutes before security. Someone took her. The first priority was searching BWI Airport systematically. On December 21st and 22nd, teams swept Terminal B. Every bathroom, every storage closet, every maintenance area, employee break rooms, janitorial spaces, restricted zones behind the gates. Airport police unlocked every door and checked every corridor. Nothing. K-9 units were brought in. Cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains swept the terminal, parking structures, and airport grounds. If Sarah had been killed on site and hidden somewhere within the complex, the dogs would alert. They didn't. Every parking lot was searched. Long-term, short-term, hourly garages, employee lots. Security walked the rows looking for anything suspicious. Nothing. Dumpsters were checked. All waste from December 19th was held and sorted by hand. If someone had harmed Sarah in the airport, they'd need to dispose of evidence. Nothing. The investigation expanded to interviews. 847 people had been working at BWI on December 19th. Ticket agents, TSA officers, gate agents, custodial staff, food service workers, security personnel, baggage handlers. Every single one needed to be interviewed. Brennan's team set up a command center at the airport. Employees were brought in systematically and asked the same questions. Did you work December 19th? What were your hours? Did you see this woman? Do you remember anything unusual? Most couldn't help. December 19th had been chaos. Packed terminals, stressed passengers, odd delayed flights. Sarah was just another face among thousands, but investigators flagged certain names. Employees with criminal records. Anyone with a history of violence. Anyone who'd been the subject of workplace complaints. Anyone who'd called in sick December 20th. One of those names was Marcus Raines. Raines worked as a security contractor for a private company providing services to BWI. He'd been employed since 2001. He had access to restricted areas, service corridors, employee-only zones, baggage areas, places passengers never see. Raines had been flagged because of workplace complaints from female employees about uncomfortable behavior, staring, inappropriate comments. Nothing had resulted in formal discipline, but the pattern was documented. On December 22nd, Marcus Raines was brought in for questioning. He was 34 years old, calm, cooperative. He confirmed he'd worked December 19th. Afternoon shift, 1 to 6 p.m. He looked at Sarah's photo and shook his head. Didn't remember seeing her. Didn't remember anything unusual. Investigators asked if he'd take a polygraph. Raines agreed. The exam was administered December 23rd. Results? Inconclusive. Not a pass, not a fail. The examiner noted Raines showed some stress responses, but nothing definitive enough to indicate deception. Brennan made a note in her file. But without evidence, without witnesses, without anything concrete, there was nothing to hold him on. He was one of dozens of employees who'd been in the airport that day. Raines was released. It was a decision that would haunt Brennan for 16 years. The investigation shifted to passengers. Every person on Sarah's flight to Richmond was identified and background checked. Investigators also reviewed passengers on other Terminal B flights departing around the same time. No red flags emerged. Sarah's financial records were pulled. Her bank account showed normal activity through December 18th. After that, complete silence. No ATM withdrawals, no credit card charges. Cell phone records were subpoenaed. Her last text was sent at 2:50 p.m. on December 19th. After that, one final ping off a cell tower near BWI at 2:53 p.m. Then the phone went dead, either powered off or destroyed. Her email showed no activity after December 18th. Social media silent. Sarah Johnson had digitally vanished at 2:53 p.m. Sarah's checked luggage was recovered from the airline's baggage office in Baltimore. It contained only clothing and toiletries. No clues. Nothing that explained where she'd gone. With no physical evidence and no clear leads, investigators began exploring theories. 4 emerged. Theory 1, voluntary disappearance. Perhaps Sarah felt overwhelmed by medical school pressures. Perhaps she wanted to escape and start over. The Johnson family and everyone who knew Sarah rejected this immediately. Jessica Coleman was interviewed extensively. Sarah loved med school. Yes, it was hard, but she was excited about her future. She'd just aced finals. She was planning spring semester. She wasn't running from anything. Brennan agreed. She'd reviewed Sarah's entire background. Academic records, medical history, financial situation. Everything pointed to stability. No debt, no troubled relationships, no signs of mental health crisis. Theory 1 was dismissed. Theory 2, medical emergency. Perhaps Sarah suffered a sudden medical event. Collapsed somewhere in the airport. Every hospital in Maryland and Virginia was contacted. No Jane Does matching Sarah's description had been admitted. Morgues were checked. No unidentified bodies. If Sarah had collapsed in the terminal, someone would have found her within minutes. Theory 2 didn't fit. Theory 3, abduction outside the airport. Perhaps Sarah left the secure area and was grabbed in a parking lot, but security footage showed Sarah passing through security at 2:51 p.m. There was no footage of her exiting. TSA had no record of her leaving. She'd taken an Uber, so she had no car in the parking lot. No reason to leave the terminal. Theory 3 was eliminated. Brennan felt the frustration building. Every theory that made sense was contradicted by evidence. Every avenue led to a wall. That left Theory 4, abduction inside the airport. Someone with access to restricted areas had intercepted Sarah between security and her gate. Someone who knew the airport layout. Someone who understood where cameras were and weren't. This was the theory that made everyone uncomfortable. It meant a predator had operated inside one of the busiest airports in America. It meant security had failed, but it was the only theory that explained everything. Sarah had been confirmed inside the secure area. She never boarded. She never left on her own. Someone with insider access had taken her. Brennan knew this was most likely, but proving it was nearly impossible without witnesses or footage of the actual abduction. On December 23rd, media picked up Sarah's story. Hopkins med student vanishes from BWI. By Christmas Eve, it was national news. CNN ran segments. NBC featured it. Local Baltimore stations camped outside the airport. Sarah's photo was everywhere. Young, smiling, the kind of face that stops people. A tip line was established. Within 48 hours, hundreds of calls poured in, sightings at rest stops, gas stations. Someone claimed Sarah got into a white van. Someone else said they saw her talking to a suspicious man. Every single tip was investigated. All led nowhere. On December 27th, the Johnson family held a press conference at BWI. Linda and Robert stood at a podium, cameras recording every word. Linda's eyes were swollen from days of crying. Our daughter, Sarah, is missing. She's 23 years old. She's a medical student at Johns Hopkins. She was coming home for Christmas. She walked into this airport and she never came out. Someone knows something. Please, if you saw anything, please come forward. We just want to bring our daughter home. Robert stood beside her, jaw clenched. Sarah is our world. She's brilliant and kind and has her whole life ahead of her. Someone took that from her. We're offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to finding Sarah. The money came from their retirement savings. Every dollar they'd saved over decades. They'd give everything if it meant finding Sarah. The press conference generated another wave of tips. More sightings, more theories, more dead ends. By early January 2004, the investigation was slowing. Not because anyone gave up, but because there was nowhere else to look. Every lead exhausted. Every employee interviewed, every piece of footage reviewed, every space searched. Sarah Johnson had walked into BWI Airport and ceased to exist. Brennan kept the case file on her desk. She reviewed it constantly, looking for something she'd missed. She couldn't let go. This was the case that would define her career, the one she couldn't solve. By March 2004, the case was officially classified as cold. The task force disbanded. FBI agents moved on. Daily searches stopped. Media coverage faded. Sarah's face disappeared from the news. The Johnson family returned to Richmond, shattered. Sarah's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it. Textbooks on her desk, Hopkins sweatshirt on her chair. Waiting for her. She never came home. If you're feeling the weight of this mystery, if Sarah's story is hitting you, go ahead and hit that like button. Stick with me. Because what happens next will prove that even when hope seems impossible, answers can still emerge. Even after 16 years, time is cruel in cases like this. When someone you love disappears without explanation, time doesn't heal. It stretches, it warps. Every day becomes a test of endurance. Every holiday a reminder, every birthday a wound reopened. For the Johnson family, 2004 turned into 2005, then 2006, then 2007. And still, nothing. No answers, no closure, no Sarah. The investigation didn't officially close. Technically, Sarah's case remained open. But open doesn't mean active. It doesn't mean detectives are working it every day, following fresh leads, making progress. It means the file sits in a cabinet somewhere, waiting, hoping that someday something will break. But as months turned into years, and that hope grew thinner. The first year was the hardest in some ways. Every milestone felt like a fresh knife wound. March 2004 brought Sarah's 24th birthday. The Johnson family lit a candle in their living room. Linda baked Sarah's favorite cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, even though there was no one to eat it. They sat around the table in silence, crying, wondering if Sarah was alive somewhere, unable to come home, or if she was gone, and they'd never know. Emily struggled most with birthdays. She'd always looked up to her sister. Now she was living in a world where Sarah was frozen at 23 forever, while Emily kept aging. It felt wrong. Backwards. May 2004 brought another unbearable moment. Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine held its graduation ceremony. Sarah's classmates walked across the stage in their white coats. Jessica Coleman received her diploma and couldn't stop crying. She looked at the empty seat where Sarah should have been. The school held a moment of silence for Sarah. Her name was read. Her photo displayed on a screen. Sarah Elizabeth Johnson, in absentia. It was an acknowledgement that she'd completed her coursework, that she'd earned her place among the graduates, but she wasn't there to receive it. Her parents attended the ceremony, sat in the audience, watched other families celebrate while their daughter's name was spoken into an auditorium full of people who would never know her. Linda accepted Sarah's diploma on her behalf. She held the leather folder in her hands and felt the weight of everything her daughter would never become. Sarah had wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. She'd wanted to heal children, give families hope. She'd worked so hard for this. And now it was just a piece of paper, a symbol of a future that would never exist. Christmas 2004 was unbearable. It was the first anniversary of Sarah's disappearance. 1 year since she'd texted her mother from the airport. 1 year since she'd walked into Terminal B and vanished. The Johnsons couldn't bring themselves to celebrate. Linda didn't decorate, didn't put up the tree, didn't play Christmas music. The holiday had become a trauma anniversary. They went to BWI Airport on December 19, 2004, stood in Terminal B where Sarah had last been seen, held a small vigil. A few of Sarah's friends from Hopkins came. Jessica was there, some of Sarah's former professors. a handful of community members who'd been following the case. They held candles and photos of Sarah, prayed for answers, prayed for closure, prayed that somehow, some way, they'd find out what happened to their daughter. But the prayers went unanswered. As 2004 became 2005, and then 2006, the Johnson family entered what could only be described as the dark middle years. The years when the initial shock wore off and was replaced by a dull, constant ache. The years when they had to figure out how to keep living when part of their family was missing. They held annual memorials for Sarah, every December 19th, sometimes at the airport, sometimes at their church in Richmond. They refused to let her be forgotten, but the media attention did fade. In 2005, Sarah's story was mentioned only on the anniversary, a brief segment on local news. 1 year later, still no answers in the disappearance of Sarah Johnson. By 2006, even the anniversary coverage was shrinking. A paragraph in the newspaper, a few seconds on the evening broadcast. By 2007, most media outlets had moved on entirely. There were other missing persons, other tragedies, other stories. Sarah became a footnote, a cold case mentioned occasionally in retrospectives about unsolved mysteries. The tip line that had once been overwhelmed with calls went silent. Weeks would pass without a single tip, then months. The $50,000 reward the Johnsons had offered went unclaimed. No one came forward with information worth pursuing. The Johnson family aged visibly under the weight of not knowing. Robert's hair went from gray to white. His face became lined and drawn. The stress triggered health problems. High blood pressure, heart issues. His doctor warned him about the strain on his cardiovascular system. But how do you stop grieving? How do you stop searching? Linda threw herself into advocacy work. She started speaking at conferences about missing persons cases, joined support groups for families living in limbo. She met other parents, other spouses, other siblings who were trapped in the same nightmare, people who understood what most couldn't. She pushed for better airport security, better surveillance systems, better protocols for when someone vanishes. If she couldn't bring Sarah home, maybe she could prevent this from happening to someone else's daughter. But the work was exhausting, and it didn't fill the Sarah-shaped hole in her life. Emily finished college in 2007. She was 23 now, the same age Sarah had been when she disappeared. The realization hit her like a truck. Her sister had been so young, just starting her life, and someone had stolen that from her. Emily struggled with survivor's guilt. Why did she get to keep living? Why did she get to graduate, start a career, fall in love, when Sarah didn't? It didn't make sense. Hope died slowly in those years, not all at once, but bit by bit. Every day that passed without answers made it harder to believe answers would ever come. By 2008, Sarah had been missing for 5 years. By 2009, 6 years. By 2010, 7. Detective Karen Brennan, now a lieutenant with Baltimore County Police, kept Sarah's file on her desk. She'd been promoted twice since 2003, moved to different units, worked dozens of other cases. But she never stopped thinking about Sarah Johnson. The case she couldn't solve. Once a month, Brennan pulled out the file and reviewed it, read through witness statements, looked at the security footage again, studied the timeline, searching for something she'd missed. She never found it. In 2010, Brennan requested funding to re-examine evidence using newer forensic technology. DNA testing had advanced significantly since 2003. Maybe there was something they could find now that they'd missed then. The request was approved, but the budget was minimal. Sarah's case was one of hundreds of cold cases. Resources were limited. Priority went to cases with active leads. Sarah's case had neither. The years from 2011 to 2018 could be called the long silence. The years when almost no one was actively working Sarah's case anymore. The years when the tips stopped entirely. The years when even the Johnson family started to lose hope. Robert's health continued to decline. In 2012, he had a minor heart attack. The doctors said it was stress-related. Decades of grief and uncertainty had taken their toll. He survived, but he was weaker. Slower. Linda watched her husband deteriorate and felt helpless. They'd been married for 35 years. They'd built a life together, raised 2 daughters, and now one of those daughters was gone, and the not knowing was literally killing Robert. Emily got married in 2013. It should have been one of the happiest days of her life, and it was beautiful, but there was a shadow over everything. An empty chair at the reception. A sister who should have been there. Sarah should have been Emily's maid of honor. Should have helped her pick out her dress. Should have given a toast. Instead, Emily wore a locket with Sarah's photo. It was the only way she could have her sister there. In 2015, Emily had a daughter. She named her Sarah. It was a way to keep her sister's name alive. A way to make sure that even if the original Sarah was gone, the name would continue. But naming her daughter after her missing sister was bittersweet. Every time Emily said the name, she thought about the woman who should be there. The aunt her daughter would never know. Detective Brennan retired from Baltimore County Police in 2016. After 28 years on the force, she'd earned her retirement. But even in retirement, she couldn't let go of Sarah's case. It haunted her. She kept copies of the file at home, still reviewed it occasionally, still wondered what she'd missed. Technology continued to advance. DNA databases expanded. Forensic techniques improved. Surveillance systems became more sophisticated. But Sarah's case remained cold. Without new evidence, without new leads, there was nothing to pursue. The 15-year anniversary came in December 2018. 15 years since Sarah had walked into BWI Airport and disappeared. A local Baltimore news station ran a retrospective piece. Where is Sarah Johnson? 15 years later, families still searching for answers. The segment featured an interview with Linda and Robert. They looked tired, worn down, but still determined. "We just want to know what happened to our daughter," Linda said, her voice breaking. "We want to bring her home. After 15 years, we deserve that. Sarah deserves that." The segment generated a handful of new tips. People who claimed they'd seen something back in 2003 but never reported it. People who had theories. Every tip was investigated by the cold case unit. Every single one led nowhere. "What time is it where you are right now?" I ask because I want you to understand something. While you've been listening to this story, maybe an hour has passed. For the Johnson family, 15 years passed. 5,478 days of not knowing. Of waking up every morning wondering if today would be the day they'd get answers, and every night going to bed without them. The agony of not knowing is a special kind of torture. It's not like grief after someone dies. When someone dies, you mourn. You bury them. You visit their grave. You have rituals and closure and a framework for moving forward. It doesn't make the pain less, but it makes it manageable. But when someone disappears, you're trapped between hope and despair. You can't fully grieve because maybe they're alive, but you can't fully hope because every rational part of you knows they're probably not. The Johnson family existed in that space for 15 years, unable to move forward, unable to let go, unable to heal. Every Christmas was a reminder. Every December 19th brought back the trauma of that day in 2003. The text message, the phone call from the airline, the realization that Sarah wasn't coming home. Linda stopped baking Sarah's favorite cake on her birthday. It hurt too much. Robert stopped going to the airport vigils. His heart couldn't take it anymore. Emily raised her daughter and told her stories about the aunt she was named after, about how smart Sarah had been, how kind, how she'd wanted to be a doctor and help children. She showed little Sarah photos of her namesake, made sure she knew that somewhere there had been another Sarah Johnson, a brilliant, beautiful woman who'd been loved and who was still missed every single day. By the end of 2018, the Johnson family had almost given up hope of ever getting answers. 15 years was a long time, too long. Sarah's case remained cold, frozen, a file in a cabinet, a family trapped in limbo. And then, in July 2019, a construction crew working in a quiet Maryland forest made a discovery that would change everything. July 15, 2019. Patapsco Valley State Park, Maryland, about 45 miles west of Baltimore. A construction crew was developing new hiking trails through dense forest that hadn't been disturbed in decades. At 10:30 a.m., a backhoe operator hit something that didn't feel like rock or root. He stopped the machine and climbed down to investigate. Protruding from the freshly turned soil was bone. He brushed away dirt and realized immediately. Human. He called over the foreman, Michael Chen. Chen took one look, secured the site, and called 911. Maryland State Police arrived within 30 minutes. Dr. Patricia Lee, a forensic anthropologist from the Maryland State Medical Examiner's Office, was called to the scene. Over 3 days, Dr. Lee's team carefully excavated skeletal remains from a shallow grave approximately 3 feet below the surface. The body had been buried hastily. Scattered bones, fragments of denim and synthetic fabric, a corroded digital watch, a ring, a necklace chain. The remains were transported to Baltimore for analysis. Female. Early 20s at time of death. Height approximately 5'6". The critical question, who was this? On August 10, 2019, dental x-rays from the remains were compared against missing persons records. Match found, Sarah Johnson. The watch matched photos from December 2003. The clothing fragments matched her last known outfit. DNA testing confirmed it definitively. After 16 years, Sarah had been found. On August 12, 2019, Detective Karen Brennan made the drive to Richmond. She'd retired 3 years earlier, but when the identification came back, current investigators asked if she'd notify the family. She'd carried this case for years. It felt right. She knocked on the door at 6 p.m. Robert answered. He was 75 now. Gray, tired. He saw Brennan's face and knew immediately. "You found her." Brennan nodded. "Sarah." Linda appeared behind Robert. Emily was already driving from North Carolina. They sat in the living room where Sarah had opened Christmas presents as a child. Brennan explained everything. The construction crew, the identification, the confirmation. Linda wept, not joy, relief. After 16 years of not knowing, they finally had an answer, a terrible answer, but an answer. Where was she? Robert asked. Patapsco Valley State Park, about 45 miles from BWI. Robert closed his eyes. All this time, she'd been less than an hour away. Can we bring her home now? Yes. Once the investigation is complete, you can bury her. The news broke the next day. Hopkins, med student found after 16 years. National coverage returned immediately. But this time, it wasn't a missing person case. This was homicide. The FBI's cold case unit joined the investigation. Agent David Torres, a specialist in decades-old cases, partnered with Baltimore County detectives. They began re-examining everything from 2003 with one critical piece of new information. The killer had known about that burial site in Patapsco Valley. How did Sarah get there? Someone drove her, someone with a vehicle, knowledge of the area, and access to her at the airport. They returned to December 19th, 2003 employee records. 847 people, cross-referenced with any connections to Patapsco Valley, property ownership, family ties, anything indicating familiarity with that remote forest. One name surfaced immediately: Marcus Raines. Raines had worked as a security contractor at BWI in 2003. He'd been interviewed and released. But now, investigators dug deeper into his background. Raines' uncle had owned 40 acres of property adjacent to Patapsco Valley State Park. Raines had spent summers there as a child. He knew that forest intimately. The burial site was less than 200 yards from the old property line. Agent Torres felt his pulse quicken. This was the connection. They pulled Raines' complete history. Born 1969. Military service, dishonorably discharged in 1995 for inappropriate conduct toward female service members. After that, a series of security jobs, a pattern of complaints from women. Staring. Inappropriate comments. None resulting in serious consequences. At BWI, hired in 2001. Terminal B, access to restricted areas, service corridors, maintenance tunnels, baggage areas. In 2002, a female TSA agent filed a complaint. Raines made sexual comments. She felt unsafe. He received a verbal warning. In December 2003, 1 week before Sarah disappeared, another complaint. A female gate agent reported Raines watching her, staring. She asked him to stop. He laughed. Raines was called into a meeting December 12, 2003, 7 days before Sarah vanished, given a written warning, told another complaint would mean termination. On December 19, 2003, Raines worked the afternoon shift, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Investigators requested archived security badge logs from BWI. The data had been preserved. It took weeks to retrieve, but eventually the records emerged. Raines' movements, December 19, 2003, 1:05 p.m., clocks in, employee entrance. 2:35 p.m., restricted corridor near security checkpoint. 2:48 p.m., service hallway adjacent to gates C10 through C15. Sarah's gate was C14. Sarah passed through security at 2:51 p.m., 3 minutes after Raines positioned himself near her gate. 3:12 p.m., service elevator to underground areas. 3:18 p.m., loading dock, lower level. 3:45 p.m., clocks out. Over 2 hours early. Supervisor's notes. Raines claimed he felt ill. Torres and the team stared at the timeline. Raines had been in position. He had access. He had opportunity. 21 minutes after Sarah cleared security, he was in the service elevator. 6 minutes later, at the loading dock. Half an hour after that, he left the airport. The timeline fit perfectly, but knowing isn't proving. They needed physical evidence linking Raines directly to Sarah's murder. The forensic team re-examined everything recovered from the burial site using 2019 technology. Trace evidence emerged, carpet fibers embedded in the clothing fragments. Analysis showed they matched commercial-grade carpet used in BWI service corridors in 2003. Synthetic fibers consistent with security uniforms were also recovered. Then came the breakthrough. DNA, degraded after 16 years, but recoverable. Touched DNA from Sarah's remains. A partial profile. Male, unknown. The profile was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database. No match. Marcus Raines had never been arrested for a crime serious enough to require DNA submission. He wasn't in the system. But investigators had a plan. In September 2019, surveillance began. They followed Raines for weeks, documented his routine, waited for the right opportunity. They couldn't approach him directly without alerting him. They needed him to discard something voluntarily. On October 3, 2019, that moment came. Raines stopped at a gas station in Glen Burnie, Maryland. He bought a coffee, drank it in his car, tossed the cup in the trash on his way out. Investigators retrieved the cup immediately. It was sent to the lab. DNA extracted from saliva on the rim. 2 weeks of analysis. On October 15, 2019, the results came back. The DNA from the coffee cup matched the unknown male DNA recovered from Sarah Johnson's remains. The probability of it being someone other than Marcus Raines, 1 in 47 trillion. They had him. Agent Torres called Detective Brennan, even though she was retired. "We got him, Karen. We got the son of a bitch." Brennan, sitting in her home with Sarah's case file still on her desk after all these years, closed her eyes and felt 16 years of weight lift arrest him. On October 22, 2019 at 6 a.m., a tactical team from Maryland State Police executed an arrest warrant at Marcus Raines' apartment in Glen Burnie. He was asleep when they breached the door. He was taken into custody without incident. Marcus Raines was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. The forensic evidence indicated Sarah had been assaulted before her death. He was arraigned that afternoon, pleaded not guilty, bail was denied. He was remanded to Baltimore County Detention Center to await trial. The Johnson family released a statement. "We are grateful to the investigators who never gave up on Sarah. While nothing can bring her back, we hope this arrest brings justice." The prosecution began building their case. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA badge access logs. Pattern of predatory behavior. Connection to the burial site, but the legal system moves slowly. Pretrial motions dragged on. The defense challenged everything. DNA collection methods, badge log authenticity, prior complaints as prejudicial. Most motions were denied. Trial was set for March 2020. Then COVID-19 hit, courts shut down, postponed again. It would be 4 years before Marcus Raines faced a jury. 4 more years the Johnson family waited for justice. But this time, they knew, they had answers, they had evidence, they had the man who killed their daughter, and they weren't letting go. Stay with me, because we're about to walk into that courtroom where, after 20 years, Marcus Raines finally faced what he did to Sarah Johnson. September 2023, 20 years after Sarah Johnson walked into BWI Airport and never came home. 4 years after Marcus Raines was arrested. The trial had been delayed repeatedly. COVID-19 shutdowns closed courts for months. Legal motions stretched through 2020 and 2021. Defense tactics pushed dates further. Marcus Raines had spent those 4 years in Baltimore County Detention Center, bail denied, awaiting this moment. Now, finally, justice was within reach. Baltimore County Courthouse in Towson, Maryland. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the back rows. Spectators lined the walls. The Johnson family sat in the front row. Linda and Robert, now in their 70s, their faces lined with decades of grief. Emily beside them, holding her mother's hand. Jessica Coleman, Sarah's best friend from Hopkins, sat directly behind them. Former classmates attended. Investigators who'd worked the case filled the gallery. Marcus Raines sat at the defense table. 54 years old now, gray hair cut short, wearing a dark suit his family had bought for the trial. His face was expressionless. He didn't look at the Johnson family, just stared straight ahead. The prosecution was led by James Walsh, a veteran prosecutor who'd spent 4 years building this case. Walsh stood before the jury. He pointed to a photograph of Sarah projected on a screen, young, smiling, wearing her Johns Hopkins sweatshirt, full of life. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Johnson was 23 years old when Marcus Raines decided she would never see 24. She was a medical student at Johns Hopkins University, top of her class. She had a future, a family that loved her, friends who admired her, dreams she was working toward. And on December 19, 2003, she walked into BWI Airport to fly home for Christmas. She never made it, because that man, Walsh pointed directly at Raines, used his position, his access, and his knowledge of that airport to hunt her, to take her, to assault her, to kill her. And then he buried her in a forest and went on living his life for 16 years while Sarah's family suffered. The evidence will show you exactly what happened. His DNA is on her remains. His badge access puts him in the exact location at the exact time. He knew the burial site. He had means, motive, and opportunity. At the end of this trial, we will ask you to find him guilty of first-degree murder. The defense's opening was shorter. Raines' attorney argued DNA didn't prove murder, only contact. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. The prosecution hadn't proven exactly how Sarah died or what the motive was. It was weak. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it. The prosecution began calling witnesses. Linda Johnson took the stand first. She described her daughter, who Sarah was, what she meant to the family. The last conversation before Sarah left for the airport, she said, "I'll see you in a few hours, Mom. I love you." And I never saw her again. The courtroom was silent. Jessica Coleman testified next. Sarah's character, her reliability, her excitement about going home. She wasn't upset. She wasn't running from anything. She was just going home. Former BWI employees testified about Raines' behavior. A woman in her 50s described how Raines made her uncomfortable in 2002. He would stare. Not just glance, but stare, like he was studying you. It made my skin crawl. I reported it. Nothing really happened. Another testified about sexual comments Raines made. He said things about my body, about what he'd like to do. I told my supervisor, he got a warning, that was it. The pattern was clear. Marcus Raines had a history of predatory behavior toward women. Complaints filed, warnings given. Nothing stopped him. Dr. Patricia Lee, the forensic anthropologist, took the stand. She explained the recovery of Sarah's remains, the condition of the bones, the burial site, items found. She showed photographs that made Linda weep. Then came the centerpiece. Dr. Amanda Reeves, a forensic DNA specialist, walked the jury through the science. How DNA was extracted from Sarah's remains despite 16 years of degradation. How a profile was developed. How it was compared to DNA from the coffee cup Marcus Raines discarded. The DNA profile recovered from Sarah Johnson's remains matches the DNA profile of Marcus Raines, Dr. Reeves explained clearly. The probability that this DNA belongs to someone other than Mr. Raines is approximately 1 in 47 trillion. The defense attorney cross-examined. Isn't it possible the DNA was transferred innocently? Maybe Ms. brushed against Mr. Raines in the airport. Dr. Reeves remained calm. The DNA was recovered from areas and in concentrations not consistent with casual contact. This is contact DNA consistent with direct physical interaction. The defense had no effective rebuttal. A digital forensics expert testified about badge access logs, a timeline displayed on screens throughout the courtroom. 1:05 p.m. Raines clocks in. 2:48 p.m. Raines in service hallway near gate C14. 2:51 p.m. Sarah passes through security. 3:12 p.m. Raines in service elevator to lower levels. 3:18 p.m. Raines at loading dock. 3:45 p.m. Raines clocks out, claiming illness. These badge swipes are automatically recorded, the expert explained. They can't be falsified. This is exactly where Marcus Raines was that afternoon. A property records expert testified about Raines' connection to Patapsco Valley. Maps showed the burial site's proximity to land Raines' family owned, less than 200 yards. Mr. Raines spent summers at this property as a child and teenager. He knew this area well. Fiber evidence was presented. Carpet fibers from BWI service corridors found on Sarah's remains. Synthetic fibers consistent with security uniforms. Week after week, the evidence mounted. Each witness, each piece of forensic analysis pointed to the same conclusion. Marcus Raines killed Sarah Johnson. The defense called only 2 witnesses. A neighbor testified Raines had always seemed normal. Quiet, kept to himself. Character testimony that fell flat. The defense called their own DNA expert who suggested contamination was possible. But under cross-examination, she admitted finding no actual evidence of contamination. Pure speculation. Marcus Raines did not testify. His attorney advised against it. Cross-examination would destroy him. The defense rested after a day and a half. Closing arguments began October 17, 2023. Walsh stood before the jury and methodically reviewed every piece of evidence. The timeline, badge access, complaints, DNA, burial site connection. Marcus Raines had access to that airport. He was in the right place at the right time. He had a documented history of targeting women. He knew exactly where to hide a body because he'd spent his childhood in those woods. And his DNA is on Sarah Johnson's remains. This is not a mystery. This is not reasonable doubt. This is a predator who got caught 20 years later because he couldn't hide from science. Walsh pointed to Sarah's photograph. Sarah Johnson was 23 years old. She had a future. She had dreams. People loved her. Marcus Raines took all of that away. He used his authority, his access, his knowledge to prey on a young woman who trusted that airport employees would keep her safe. He betrayed that trust. He destroyed her. For 20 years he said nothing. He let Sarah's family suffer, not knowing if she was alive or dead. He showed no remorse, no conscience, no humanity. Find him guilty. The defense's closing grasped at straws. Argued the state hadn't proven beyond reasonable doubt exactly how Sarah died or where precisely she was taken. Couldn't explain the DNA, so minimized it. Couldn't provide an alibi, so called the timeline circumstantial. The jury wasn't buying it. October 18, 2023, the jury began deliberations. 36 hours later, October 19th at 3 p.m., they reached a verdict. The courtroom filled. The Johnson family took their seats. Marcus Raines was brought in, shackled. The jury filed in. The foreman stood. Judge Patricia Simmons addressed the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant? We find the defendant guilty. Linda Johnson collapsed into sobs. Robert held her, tears streaming. Emily wept openly. On the charge of kidnapping, how do you find the defendant? Guilty? On the charge of sexual assault, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. Marcus Raines showed no emotion. He stared straight ahead, stone-faced, as the verdicts were read. No tears, no reaction, nothing. The courtroom erupted, crying, hugging, relief flooding through everyone who'd fought for justice. Jessica Coleman held Linda's hand. We got him. We finally got him. Detective Brennan, retired but present, sat in the back and allowed herself to cry for the first time in 20 years. The case that haunted her. Justice had finally arrived. 20 years late, but it had arrived. Judge Simmons banged her gavel. The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. This court is adjourned. Marcus Raines was led out in handcuffs and shackles. He didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, the Johnson family addressed the media. Robert spoke, voice shaking but strong. For 20 years, we didn't know what happened to our daughter. For 20 years, we lived in hell. Today, we finally have justice. Sarah can rest now, and so can we. Linda added, voice breaking, no verdict will bring Sarah back. But knowing the man who took her will never hurt anyone else, that matters. The trial was over, the guilty verdict delivered. But there was still one more step. Sentencing. November 2nd, 2023. 2 weeks after the guilty verdict. The same Baltimore County courtroom. Sentencing day. Marcus Raines was brought in wearing an orange detention jumpsuit, hands and feet shackled. He sat at the defense table, expressionless as always. Judge Patricia Simmons presided. Before imposing sentence, she allowed the Johnson family to deliver victim impact statements. Linda Johnson went first. She walked slowly to the podium, steadying herself with one hand. She looked directly at Marcus Raines. For 20 years, I didn't know if my daughter was alive or dead. For 20 years, I woke up every morning wondering if today would be the day I'd get answers. For 20 years, I lived in hell. You took my daughter's future. You took her life. But you also stole 20 years from my family. You made us live in agony while you went about your life like nothing happened. I hope you spend every day for the rest of your life thinking about what you did. I hope prison is exactly what you deserve. Robert Johnson spoke next. His voice was frail but steady. Sarah was going to be a doctor. She was going to save lives. She was brilliant and kind, and she had everything ahead of her. You're a coward. You preyed on a young woman who trusted that the people working at that airport would keep her safe. You betrayed that trust, you murdered her, and you deserve everything that's coming to you. Emily Johnson was last. She looked at Raines with pure hatred. You took my sister when I was 19 years old. I'm 39 now. I've lived half my life without her. I got married. I had children. I've done all the things Sarah should have gotten to do, and every milestone, every happy moment is overshadowed by the fact that she's not here. You stole her from us, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure she's never forgotten. You don't get to take that from us, too. Marcus Raines stared at the table in front of him, said nothing, showed nothing. Judge Simmons then addressed him directly. Mr. Raines, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of the first-degree murder of Sarah Johnson. The evidence against you was overwhelming. You used your position of trust to prey on a young woman. You assaulted her. You murdered her. You hid her body and allowed her family to suffer for 2 decades without answers. You have shown no remorse, no accountability. You are a danger to society, and you will never be free again. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will die behind bars. May you never see freedom again. Raines was led out of the courtroom in chains. He didn't look back, didn't say a word. It was over. Sarah's body, finally released by the medical examiner after all forensic work was complete, was buried in late November 2023 in Richmond, Virginia. Hundreds attended the funeral. Classmates from Johns Hopkins, investigators who'd worked the case, friends and family who'd never stopped loving her. Sarah Elizabeth Johnson, December 3rd, 1980 to December 19th, 2003. Beloved daughter, sister, and friend. 20 years after her death, she was finally laid to rest. The case prompted immediate changes. BWI Airport conducted a comprehensive review of security protocols and employee oversight. Reforms were implemented throughout 2024. Enhanced background checks for all employees with access to restricted areas. A centralized system for reporting harassment and inappropriate behavior. Increased surveillance coverage eliminating blind spots. Mandatory training on recognizing and reporting predatory patterns. Maryland legislators proposed Sarah's Law, requiring stricter vetting and continuous monitoring of airport employees nationwide. The bill gained bipartisan support and passed in early 2025. Sarah's case also became a cornerstone in forensic science education. The recovery of usable DNA from remains buried for 16 years. The use of modern technology to solve a decades-old cold case. The importance of preserving evidence even when cases seem unsolvable. Law enforcement agencies across the country studied the investigation. Cold case units were reinvigorated. Other families of missing persons were given hope that answers might still come. The Johnson family continues Sarah's legacy in their own ways. Linda Johnson became a full-time victim advocate. She speaks at conferences about missing persons cases, works with families living in the agony of not knowing, pushes for policy changes that protect women and hold predators accountable. She transformed her grief into purpose. Robert Johnson lived just long enough to see justice served. He passed away in May 2024, 6 months after the trial, from heart failure. The decades of stress and grief had taken their toll, but he died knowing his daughter's killer was behind bars. He died with answers, with closure. That meant everything. Emily Johnson established a medical charity in Sarah's name, providing scholarships to students pursuing pediatric oncology, the field Sarah had dreamed of entering. Every year, young doctors receive funding to continue the work Sarah never got to do. Her dream lives on through them. Johns Hopkins University created an annual scholarship in Sarah's memory. Each year, a medical student demonstrating academic excellence and compassion receives support to complete their education. Sarah's name is spoken at every award ceremony. She is remembered not just as a victim, but as a brilliant student who belonged there. Marcus Raines is currently incarcerated at North Branch Correctional Institution in Maryland, a maximum security prison. He is serving life without parole. He will die there. He has refused all interview requests over the years, has never spoken publicly about Sarah's murder, has never admitted guilt, has never shown an ounce of remorse. He is 55 years old now. He will grow old in a cell. He will never breathe free air again. And that is exactly what he deserves. Justice was delayed for 20 years. 20 years too long. But justice did arrive. The Johnson family got answers. They buried their daughter. They watched her killer convicted and sentenced. It doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't bring Sarah back. But it matters. Sarah Johnson was more than a victim. She was a brilliant student, a loving daughter and sister, a friend who showed up for people, a young woman who wanted to heal children with cancer. She had dreams and plans and a future that should have been hers. Marcus Raines stole that future. But he didn't erase Sarah. Her story proves that predators often hide in plain sight, that complaints about inappropriate behavior must be taken seriously before they escalate, that women who report feeling unsafe deserve to be believed and protected, that airports and workplaces must prioritize safety over convenience. Sarah's story also proves that even when cases go cold, even when years or decades pass, justice can still arrive. Forensic science advances. Dedicated investigators refuse to give up. Families keep fighting. And sometimes, finally, truth emerges. Sarah Johnson's voice still speaks. Through the reforms her case inspired. Through the scholarships bearing her name. Through the families who found hope in her story. Through every person who hears her name and remembers. She wanted to save lives. In a way, she still is. Thank you for joining us in uncovering stories hidden in the shadows. Every victim deserves to be remembered. Every truth deserves to be told. To follow more cold cases, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share these stories. Your support helps keep their voices alive.